Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good morning. I have a couple of prompts going for you in the chat area. So I want to make sure that you all are seeing all my messages. Good morning to you. I see you, Sean. Good morning, Jennifer. Hello, Maria. Good to see you. Hi, Dee Dee. So wonderful. Hi, Carol. Linda, good morning to you. Oh, I love this. I love this because I used to love when they would do roll call. You know how they would call your name? Roll call. So I love just kind of acknowledging all of you and roll calling you if you would. So good to see you, Eric. Hi, Lakeisha. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Oh, so thrilled to see all of you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I know this is good stuff. I am so excited because we've got such a tremendous workshop planned for you all today. So I want to just take a few minutes. I know many of you, and for those of you I don't know, good morning to you. Good morning. I see you, Paula. My name is Joanna Deshay, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as Executive Director of Diversity Leadership Alliance. And we are 23, I was going to say 22, but this is our 23rd year doing this work. And this is our social justice webinar series. We are really excited because today is such a tremendous topic, right? We've got a really, really interesting topic. I've got my notes ready, Frank. I'm going to be taking notes as you present and kind of diving in at the end with some questions. So I'm really excited about that. Diversity Leadership Alliance is all about taking actionable steps. We created this platform to have conversations, critical conversations that matter. And we're navigating through 2024 with a bit of resilience, a lot of renewed hope, in hopes of having you all have an open heart, an open mind around this work of equity and belonging. As you all know, there is still a lot of work to be done. And we are honored to be in community with you this morning to do that work. Today is going to be a wonderfully introspective webinar, which I absolutely love. And it will help each of us continue to grow. It will help each of us continue to learn and really kind of check for understanding of how we want to and intend to get deeper in our work. As you all know, I always say, and I'll go on record as saying, I always say that DLA is a safe space and a safe place. And talking to our presenter, Frank, who is a bit of a linguist, right, has done work around language. He said, may I offer a suggestion, which I took so willingly this morning because I think it's wonderful and timely. And he said, instead of guaranteeing it to be a safe space, right, how about you just make it a protected space? That I can control. I can protect what comes in. I can protect, how you interact. But what I can't guarantee is that the space will be safe. So thank you for that, Frank. And so this is a protected space to have awkward conversations, right? So you're going to be a little uneasy today. It's okay to be uneasy, but awkward conversations that at the end of the day will shift the pendulum in terms of change. We are so grateful that we have the leadership that we have. And I really am thankful to Tondra Richardson, who you'll meet in just a few seconds here. Well, actually, more like a minute, Tondra, you've got some time. And she'll tell you a bit more about today's session, and she'll tell you a bit more about the presenter. Before we do that, hopefully you guys have these dates down. Before we begin, I want to make sure, so get your pens and pencils down, or actually just go to the website. That's probably easier. But our annual conference is coming up. It is October 3rd and 4th, which is a Thursday and Friday. And as you know, we have our virtual workshops on that Thursday. We've got 4 unique workshops, and we've got an in-person equity town hall on Friday. Tickets are already on sale, and there's a great special right now. I know I hate to say specials, but there is a great special. The tickets are $75. And they're also 10% off that $75. And they are an early bird sale going through the 6th of September. So if you think you want to attend, you want to support, you've got it down on your calendar anyway, you might as well get a better deal, right? So definitely, if you have any questions as we move through today's agenda, ping me in the chat. I'll be keeping up with the chat. But this year's theme is all around building resilience and renewed hope for equity and inclusion. So just make sure you are going to our website, diversityleadershipalliance.org. And after I bring Tandra on, I'll drop some direct links for you in the chat so you can go right to that. Now, on to today's wonderful webinar content and introducing you to the lovely Tandra Richardson. I keep telling her I cannot say her name without the word lovely in front of it. She will be guiding you throughout today's webinar and also serves as the chair of the DLA Education Committee and is an esteemed board member for the DLA Board of Directors. Without further ado, please welcome Tandra Richardson, and good morning to you, Tandra. Cheers.
Good morning, Joanna, and thank you for the lovely compliment. I also dropped the link to DLA in the chat. I'm hoping that while we have such great interaction on a monthly basis at our workshops, that you all will kind of close out the year with us and do that deep dive. So please register, please join us. Everyone loves a good discount, right? You know, I know Joanna said she didn't want to say that, but you know, discounts are great. So again, thank you, Joanna, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Joanna mentioned, my name is Tandra Richardson, and I am the Director of Student Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Phoenix. I'm also a proud DLA Board of Director member. We are grateful to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules and during the summer to do the work and grow deeper in your equity practice. Please make sure that you're taking good notes, making comments in the chat area, and asking questions in the Q&A area. We'll have a chance towards the end of the session to answer questions formally from the Q&A area and also bring some of you live to ask your questions, so be ready. DLA exists to bring a voice to marginalized communities, provide a forum for constructive dialogue, and eradicate racism through strategic professional development workshops. Together with our business and community partners, we enhance the workplace and highlight the value of diversity as an essential part of any successful business model. We intend to cultivate change agents ready to lead with a renewed sense of bravery, urgency, and empathy. Through these vital monthly workshops, our annual conference and youth leadership program, we provide a safe and protected, as Joanna stated, safe and protected space and platform to have critical conversations that impart change. Now, DLA recognizes that we are simply stewards of this great land that we occupy. We would like to acknowledge and identify the Indigenous peoples, nations, and histories within our area. We acknowledge the Akimel Udhem, Pipash, and Yavapai. We acknowledge these people, their ancestors, their descendants, and the land itself. At DLA, we're all about progression, and we want our DLA community to know that we are working diligently to move beyond just an acknowledgement and into building a solidarity action plan for our Indigenous communities. All right, so we had some of the housekeeping out of the way. We got a little bit more coming up. But today is the 7th workshop of our DLA 2024 Social Justice Series. And we dive into the topics of authenticity, agency, and reconnection. But before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that DLA is a community education nonprofit organization. And as such, we want to ensure that our programs and events are inviting, respectful, and accessible to all. So we just want to take a few minutes to remind everyone about our community rules of engagement. So we will be bringing up those rules of engagement on the screen, I believe, and we're also sharing them in the chat. I do want to just point out one of our community rules of engagement before we jump into our content today. We ask for today and for all of our workshops that we all listen actively and be open to the full spectrum of perspectives. Honestly, this is something we should do today in this workshop as we leave here and go into work in our community and as we have conversations with others. We know we are in quite a time right now. So let's be open and let's listen actively so we can learn and grow. So our August DLA workshop, we intend to create a space that people of color and our white allies can each call their own, a space to authentically be real, to reconnect with other leaders of color and reclaim every part of who they are. And imagine white allies having their own space to reflect, relearn, and reemerge stronger in their racial justice journeys. In today's session, Frank Velásquez Jr. will share the benefits of having distinct spaces to do our inner work and do that work apart so that we can do the outer work together. Drawing on personal stories, Frank will shed light on how learning separately empowers us to lead with more authenticity, courage, and joy, giving us collective power to transform our communities. I will tell you, as soon as we were introduced to Frank and we started following his content, I mentioned to him this morning that as he shares today, and I'm sure he'll share more information about his work and how you can stay connected to him, I receive his newsletters and his voice is heard through the newsletters. How often do you receive racial or social justice engagement from leaders that make you excited, and you can hear the excitement and enthusiasm in the messaging that you're receiving, despite the heaviness of the content that we're taking in? So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce you to today's storyteller and DEI coach, Frank Velásquez. He is a storyteller extraordinaire and social justice warrior. He has an unshakable belief in racial and gender equity. Frank creatively connects our stories, preserving the unique flavor of each one like a delicious bowl of gumbo. Ooh, that's making me hungry this early in the morning. As the founder of Hood and Ascending Leaders in Color program, he's forging paths for people of color to lead with authenticity, courage, and joy. I'm telling you, that joy comes through in those messages. Because for Frank, advising equity isn't just a job, it's a movement towards building generational wealth for communities of color to thrive. So now I would like to introduce you to Frank Velásquez, and I turn it over to you, Frank.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And y'all can hear me, right? Okay. So thank you so much, Joanna and Tandra, for that introduction. And thank you so much for the people on the call. I think you just gave me an extra 13 minutes or so. So that's pretty cool. So I'm just going to dive right in. And yeah, let's just jump right in. Y'all got my bio. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And let's start. All right, so I believe y'all are in the right place. This session is called People of Color and White Allies, Doing Our Inner Work Apart to Successfully Do the Outer Work Together. So usually before I start any session, I like to kind of frame the conversation so that you kind of get an idea of who I am and how the session is going to go. So I'm going to go over this relatively quickly. So usually, well, not even usually, always, the first 5 minutes of every session that I do, I have like a lot of nervous energy. So it tends to just, I might sound like I'm talking fast, but I promise after 5 minutes or so, I'll start kind of getting into my groove, but it's literally just like a soda can, like ready to burst. I'm like super excited. So you might hear that in my voice, but hopefully maybe with the thumbs up in the chat box. If you're all okay with that, just give me a thumbs up. I'll go to the next one. The other thing that I do, and honestly, this is funny because we're doing this virtually, so you're not even going to really notice when I'm using my notes. But if this was in person, I do use my notes. I don't like to I don't like to stand behind the podium. So what I tend to do is, to be in with the audience, I won't stand behind the podium, and I'll literally be in the space with the attendees. And typically, I do have notes. With this one, obviously, the notes will be there for me. So that's kind of my cheat there. But if you were in person, I would be asking you, hey, are you okay if I use my notes? So again, if you give me a thumbs up in the chat box or whatever to let me know that that's okay as well. All right, so then the next one, and this is where I can kind of tell a fraction of Frank's story. It is always my commitment to be authentic in these spaces. Tandra and Joanna and myself, we all have day jobs. And so like now I have this business as well. And so when I'm in my business, this is my space to be authentic. In my day job, I can't be as authentic. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It's a relatively, well, I don't want to jump ahead, so I'll just tell you why. So anytime I'm in my space, I love to be, I want to be as authentic as I can be. So again, give me a thumbs up in the chat box if you're okay with that, for me being authentic in this space. Sometimes with authenticity does come these moments where you might feel something, but I promise you, everything that I say in this space, um, I've really gone through it in myself, and I promise, and I'm committed to being respectful as I challenge some of our thinking that we've been conditioned to think a certain way. So again, thumbs up in the chat box if you're okay, if you're good with that, my commitment to being respectful as well. All right, so there's my frame. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. This is my thought, and I'll read it out loud. And of course, y'all can read it yourself. But this is kind of like, again, part of the framing. So I do acknowledge that each of you comes into this space with your own unique life experience, which contributes to the way you take in information. As I mentioned, all of the content as well as the physical space in this session has been carefully curated to create a space in which you can share your stories in a protected manner. This is done intentionally because conversations about race are often difficult in mixed company. If you encounter a moment that is emotionally challenging and manifesting in feelings of discomfort and unrest, I do encourage you to feel what you're feeling, and then after the presentation to connect with me. This session was created for the sole purpose of expanding your engagement in social media, social justice, and I will support you throughout your learning in this presentation and beyond the presentation. All right, so are y'all okay with that? Again, a quick thing in the chat box. I'm ready to go if you're ready to go. This is going to be exciting. All right. So I'm going to share a story. So I want you to imagine that this happened to you. All right. So get into that mindset. This story is about you. All right. So it's just a normal day. You suddenly get this email. And of course, you're curious about, oh, well, who's emailing me? And this email is from an organization called the FF State Conference. And they are a named conference. And you're like, oh, okay. And so they tell you, hey, I came across this session that you do called How to Engage Donors Using Community-Centered Practices. We really would love for you to present at our conference. We think that, we're looking for folks who work in the DEIA space, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And we really just think that this session would be fantastic. You don't even have to submit a proposal. If you're interested, just let us know. So of course, you're feeling pretty giddy. You're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I didn't even have to submit for this. You're super excited. And then and then I forgot to tell you is that as they were going through telling you what to do, they said, if you're interested, just let us know, and then click on this form if you're interested in tabling, something like that. So then I go into the form and I'm like, okay. So here's a couple of things that came to mind as I was going through the form. One, no speaker fee, so they don't pay. They don't pay. The second thing that I noticed was not only do they not pay, they were going to ask me for money they're asking you for money to if you want to have a table. So those are your things. So now you know that they don't pay. And if you do want to go and if you do want to attend, you're going to have to pay to table your services. So let's recap that really quick. So one, you get this email. It's with this major conference, a state conference called FFF. They found out about your session. They're asking you to present. They picked you because you're an expert in this area. You're excited. You find out that they don't pay for speaker fees, and you find out that you will have to shell out some dollars if you do want a table for your services. So now my question is, and this is where your mics are open for those that want to share, but you can also put it in the chat box, but I really encourage you to share it as well so we can all hear. What would you do? And if this was you and this happened to you, what would you do? And maybe I'll stop sharing for a second. What might you do in that situation? And feel free to, I think people are muted still.
I have unmuted quite a few folks. So there we go. Mary's got her hand. Thank you,
Go ahead,
Mary, for that. I greatly, I will, Mary, I think you are good to go.
Go ahead, Mary. Or it's Nicole, I think it might be. Nicole?
We've got two of them. Mm-hmm. All right, so I've got a few hands that are up. Thank you so much for that. I will unmute as we go through. So if you would raise your hand, I will unmute you, and you should be good to go.
Yeah, go ahead and jump in if you're able to talk.
So Mary, you're the first one up, and you'll just hear a little click over, Mary, and you should be able to. You should be good to go to speak. So you might have to unmute yourself on your end. But you've been promoted, Mary, and you're ready to go. And I'll move down the list. If you would raise your hand for me, and several of you have been allowed to talk. So Mary, and then we've got Elizabeth also. Elizabeth, I've got you up there. So Elizabeth, hi Elizabeth, thank you.
Hi, good morning. Always so
morning.
great to be here. Thank you. I think in today's, sorry, my desk is squeaky. In today's day and age, probably a no. You know, maybe 10 years ago, I would have, wanted to get some more information. I would have like kind of stayed on the hook for a little while. But in today's day and age, no. I mean, there's so many scams out there. There's so many opportunities to. Yes, and I also know that this is kind of a strategy for when you're looking for jobs too. They'll want you to do some work for them before they hire you. I don't know. I just think, yeah, we know our value, and as much as I would like to get more information, I think honestly, I probably would just pass on by.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And let me add a caveat, and people who've already responded in the chat box, I am reading them, so those are great answers. But Elizabeth, would it change if this was a new business? So this is your new business. Maybe you're like a year in. How might that change your approach? Just curious.
Yeah,
And then I put that out to everybody as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because that's an investment in, maybe I would consider it, and maybe I would consider it or negotiate an amount even, as long as it's something, that was really going to be beneficial and I'd have some ROI on it. Yeah, I might be more willing to in a very preliminary stage of a job, right? It's a tax write-off, all of that, so.
Cool. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah. Just now that I added that caveat, if this was a new business, would that change your thoughts on potentially doing it?
Others, just go ahead and raise your hand. We're looking at you so we can go ahead and thank you, Paula. All right, Paula, give me just a second. I will get you. Yeah, so if you raise your hand, I can get right to you and I can make sure that you are ready. So Paula, you'll hear a little click on your end and you should be good to go, Paula.
Did I do that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
you did. Hi, Paula.
Hi. So one of the things that comes to mind is that if it is a space of DEIA, that the fact that they're making you pay for a table, kind of gets me thinking like, okay, well, someone said, pay to play. And to me, it's like, I think it should be on both ends, right? If it's a brand new company, they're trying to get the word out about diversity and all of that, then it has to come a place where it's like, okay, well, you speak and then you also get to table, so that there's like, we're raising more awareness. I think that if you're just asking people to do things for free, especially on those topics, even if it's a new organization and there's nothing really for other people to gain other than the audience, I think that becomes part of the problem.
Good
Yeah,
point.
thank you, Paula. Yeah, and I'm reading a lot of the comments, a lot of hard passes. Others would say, like, I want to think about, they would talk to the speaker, ask more questions. Carol says, as a new business or nonprofit, I'd ask more questions and ask other businesses or nonprofits how important this conference is and how many people attend. Jake says, I'm not sure pay to play is taking access into account, though. And then Don said recently came across a conference where you were asked to speak, but then pay to attend. I sort of went blank with that. So yeah, I really appreciate the diversity of responses. If there's one or two more people who'd like to comment, as Joanna said, please raise your hand. You know, the big piece of this presentation is getting a lot of the interaction. And I absolutely get it through the chat box, but certainly some verbal responses as well. Any other thoughts? Would you do this if you're a relatively new business and they asked you to do this and do it for free?
So I've got Eva. Eva, I am promoting you. Eva Romero will be joining us. Eva, I am promoting you. You are ready to make your comments. So hi, Eva.
Hi, good morning. Good
Morning.
morning, Frank.
Morning, Eva.
I think it could be a good opportunity for education, right? I think in my experience, I've seen that the labor and the resources and the expense of EDI education, of this kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion education, I see it often fall in on the shoulders of people of color. Right. And I think there's a power dynamic there that white people need to be aware of, that they have the responsibility to carry the burden when it comes to this education, because it's work and it's a special kind of emotional labor when we educate people on these topics.
Yeah.
So that needs to be taken into account. And if these are people who are open to having that conversation with, that I think it's worth having. But also like even having to bring up that this is a conversation and this is a dynamic and this is a power thing that we have to revisit. Again, that's, on me, right? So, where I am in terms of my capacity is something that I'm going to look at carefully. I think it was great, Frank, that you threw that in there. Like, what if your company's new? What if this is something that you kind of really, want the exposure and you're trying to get your name out there? That adds a lot of, a lot to that dynamic as well. So we are caught often between that rock and a hard place. And I think it's really great once, you're established enough to not have to give these things too much.
Right. And you added it right in there. Like if you're established, you might have some more consideration or some more black and white answers versus what you said if it's a new business. So thank you, Eva. Thank you all. So I'm going to continue moving forward with this and just kind of share something with you. So one, I want to ask, because I did read through all of those responses, very different. So some were very straight on. Now, why might some of our responses differ? And again, just put in the chat box why you think maybe we had such an array of different responses. Lived experience, I see different perspectives. Lived experience. Different boundaries, perhaps who've had experiences with specific experience, financial situation experience, access. We're in different places in terms of capacity, different people. I see, yeah, race and gender disparities. So I'm going to kind of put up my next slide and say often, sometimes what's going on there? Boop. People of color, we often see things that white folks just don't, particularly in white spaces. And I'm going to kind of explain what a white space is. But before I do that, yeah, the space we're in right now might still be a white space. And I want to ask you, why might this still be a white space? And again, you can put it in the chat box. But certainly if there's anybody who wants to verbalize it, but why might, even in this context of where we're sitting and listening to this, why might this still be a white space? Attendance, soup is a corporate meeting space usually. I like that, Jake. Other reasons why the space we're in right now might be a white space, even though we've led with it being a DEI space, protected space, why might it still be a white space? Shared space is white space. Ashley puts still a business, which conditions towards a white space. Thank you, Justina. Love that. Eva says, what are the dominant structures? Neoliberal, capitalist, or anti-racist? Those are all great responses. So now I'm going to again move forward. Here's what a white space, by definition. Oh, I like this. There's no food involved. Kimberly, I love that. It depends on who we put this together. Are the conversations truly pertaining to people of color experiences, or what people think should be people of color experiences are? So here's what it's defined as a white space. It's usually a situation that reinforces a normative sensibility in societal settings in which people of color are typically absent, not expected, and or marginalized when present. Elijah Anderson, who wrote Black and White Space, says white people can typically avoid spaces of color, but people of color are required to navigate the white space as a condition of their existence. And I frame this because I want to ask you now, again, in the chat box, give me some examples of physical white spaces and non-physical white spaces. What are some examples of physical white spaces that we navigate that are around us, and non-physical ones? Corporate boardrooms, LinkedIn echo chambers, physical white spaces, actual buildings. For my field, the courtroom. Yup. That is absolutely a white space. Country club, banks, anything to do with finance, anything corporate, non-physical. I love that. Digital spaces. Those are great. So I'm going to just kind of give you some of my examples here. I heard boardrooms, as you can see in this photo, it's very white. Conferences, typically, because of the price point, is very white. Still getting some great responses in your retail, government buildings. And then so now that I've asked that, so non-physical, what might be some examples of non-physical white spaces? We heard Zoom as one. Friend groups, podcasts, social media. Yeah. So I'm going to put my example up here. A non-physical white space might be thinking about like being in what's considered professional, either or thinking is considered white space. Punctuality is considered, that might be considered a white supremacy characteristic. So those are some of those things where those are some examples. Stock images, advertising, I'm still seeing the comments coming in. Great marketing. So those are some examples. And so how do people of color, now this is a question to my people of color who are on this call, how do you navigate white spaces, both physical and non-physical? How do you navigate them? What do you do? Code switching right off the bat. Very carefully, Achilles says. Poorly, it seems. Cautiously. So give me some real examples. So like the code switching. So what are other ways? What are things that you do to navigate? Tiptoe through the raindrops, get in and out as fast as I can. Oh, those are all great examples. Use my customer service voice. Oh, yep, absolutely. Hold my tongue. Overly friendly to not appear aggressive. Totally. Select carefully, imitating the behavior and voice of those around me. Oh, these are great examples. I scan the room and make sure I embrace self-care. I do that as well. Try not to stand out. Oh, that hits hard, so I'm going to give you some examples that I have here. Thank you all, and keep them coming in. So kind of the way we look, the way we dress, and this absolutely happens more for those who identify as female. Another way we navigate is yeah, we put on the mask when we go in. Shrink and hide, Sean says. And then the other way we do it is, yeah, we just try to blend in, put our head down and go forward, try to be invisible and avoid. Like these are true. Lie a lot. It's hard. These are absolutely true things that we do to navigate white spaces. So as I flubbed, you can probably tell that story at the beginning, that happened to me. So this was a year ago, and I've changed the name of the organization to protect them. But yeah, so yeah, that was me. So this was my presentation. They literally reached out to me, asked everything that they said. Then I went to go look, and I have a relatively new business. I went through that whole process of like, do I do this? Do I not do I say something? What do I do? And it was something that I really processed. And so I want to share something with you when I actually responded to them, but what I was really thinking. So I did a level of code switch. So y'all ready to hear my code switching? All right, so I'm gonna go from my code switch and then to the real Frank. So what I emailed this person versus what I was really wanting to email this person. All right, so here we go. So good afternoon, Becky. That's the code switch. Real Frank says, hey, Becky. Code switch. I want to first acknowledge my gratitude in you reaching out to me to present this important information to the many talented fundraisers in our community. Real Frank says, I appreciate you reaching out. Not going to lie, this sesh is fire, and I would most F be a fave for your FFF folks. Code switch. I reviewed the speaker form, and I would like to take this moment to share a few perspectives as a person of color being asked to present at an IDEA-focused workshop at the FFF conference. Yeah, I looked at your form, and if I'm going to be honest, I'm feeling a certain something as a brown man that you're asking to speak. And I gently ask that you read the following with an open mind and heart because I'm about to be a little bit vulnerable with you. Real Frank, what I'm about to say is probably going to sting, but I'm going to say it with love, and I hope you'll pick up what I'm about to put down. First, historically, white people have 10 times the generational wealth that Black people have and 8 times the generational wealth of Latinx. White folks got 10 times more money than Black folks, and they got 8 times more money than brown folks. That's just facts. Code switch. Additionally, banks have historically invested in white entrepreneurs at almost 2 times the rate as entrepreneurs of color, and only 60% of entrepreneurs of color get the full funding they request. Banks give twice as much green to white entrepreneurs than Black and brown ones, and only 60% of peeps of color who got money from the bank get the full amount of what they asked for. I say this because I want to point out that it is likely much easier for white presenters to take a non-paying gig than for people who look like me to showcase our subject matter expertise at no cost. Real Frank. Truth is, I ain't broke. I ain't reaching either. And even if I was making bank, I can't do it. I just can't. It ain't right, and it ain't ever going to be right. I want to quickly share 2 examples of what similar organizations have done to pay equitably and or creatively barter. I'm going to share what 2 other conferences are doing to make this shit right. First example is the FFF local chapter. They paid me $500 to present this same workshop last month. Bruh, last month, your local chapter paid me $500 to do the same sesh. $500 for the exact same sesh. Code switch. The second example is XYZ conference. They asked me to present for their August conference, and though they also do not pay their speakers, they did offer me the opportunity to exhibit free of charge. Code switch. Real Frank. Number 2, another conference I'll be at. They don't pay neither, but you know what they did? They gave me a booth for free without me asking for one, for free. Code switch. Please understand that I really would love to present at your conference. I have no doubt that your members would be positively impacted by the material I present. I showcased this session at the 2022 Nonprofit Storytelling Conference to a packed room of over 130 attendees. It was extremely well received. Now I want to be for real. This sesh is exactly what your folks at FFF need. Last year at MPSC, this sesh was packed. Zero doubts it's going to be packed again. Code switch. If there genuinely isn't an opportunity to pay, then I want to request an opportunity to exhibit free of charge. I think this is a reasonable barter. Look, if you can't pay, you can't pay, but bruh, you should at the bare minimum give me a booth. Code switch. Thank you for allowing me to express my perspectives on this topic. DEIA work is critical, and how organizations model it is equally critical. I appreciate you, but y'all can't keep expecting peeps of color to just accept what is. It ain't right. Be better. Code switch. I look forward to talking. Real frank, I don't know if you're going right back, but I said what I said, crossing my fingers and hoping for the best. So this is me telling my story authentically to you. And I'm doing it in maybe a white space. You know, when I mean in this space that we're in right now, it's not always easy to share this, particularly a mixed company. Yeah, it was definitely something that I needed to do. And then I'll go back into all of that in a bit.
Frank,
But
can I ask you a quick
yes,
question?
sure.
I'm like dying to jump in here, and I apologize. I don't
Yes.
mean to derail you, but
No, no,
had
no.
me.
This
I'm
is the
so glad.
interaction that I was hoping for.
I am so glad. I am so glad I was on mute because I was dying when you were code switch. I don't know if anyone else in the chat was. I was dying. Yes. See, so Don is saying haha as well. So I want to tell you, what do you do? I would love your perspective on something. I've never had this happen, but I'll tell you what I have had happen, where they've said everyone that we've invited to this prestigious FFF conference is not getting paid. They're paying their dues, the whole shebang, right? You get to the conference, you're on a panel. I happen to be sitting on a panel. Then I find out that my panel members, right, to my right and to my left, who were not people of color, were paid. And they said, you know, I guess the stipend is helpful, you know. And so I found it very difficult because it looks crass to go back and be like, wait, they got paid and I didn't get paid. So when you're having that conversation about equity, when I've already given the work, right? I've already presented, I've been part of this panel. There are four of us. I don't know if the fourth person was, but the two people next to me were having this conversation across me about the stipend that they received. How do you not feel? I'll say it in my, my authentic, but how do you not feel a certain type of way about that? And address it.
Well, that's literally what this session is about. So it's like literally, it's building towards where you feel more and more comfortable, which is why I do advocate for separate spaces. They're literally different spaces of healing, but I won't answer your answer directly, but as we go through this, let me know if it gets answered as we go through this.
Perfect.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And again, by all means, I want people to continue to, if you can speak, I love that interaction, but if the chat box worked best for you, I am reading it. I have the chat box open as well. So now this question is specifically for my people of color. Why do you think we need our own spaces? Why would people of color need our own spaces when we have a situation like this occur? So please just write in the box or say, raise your hand and you can say it audibly. But why would people of color need our own spaces? And I'm asking this to my people of color on this call. So we know we're not alone, that we're not stupid or crazy. We can be ourselves and say like what it means to take a break from the gaslighting, because we don't need fragile responses to interfere with the work that we're trying to do. Oh, these are golden answers. Yes, to ground ourselves. For that protection and safety we mentioned at the top of the workshop. Yes, to know that we'll be checked with love if we need it. Oh my gosh, I'm like literally getting chills. Please keep them coming. Oh, these are great responses. Just want time to just be me. Paula has her hand up.
Yep, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
I was
no.
let you know that Paula has her hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and promote Paula so she can kind of share
Absolutely.
her thoughts with you.
Yeah.
So we've got
valid.
Paula Lopez. Paula, you are ready to go.
Yeah, I love this question. And one of the things, so I've been working closely with Frank in other things, but like just to give a really good example of that, I was talking with Frank about my past, and I didn't even have to put things together in a very articulate way to Frank just be like, yes, it's about like assimilating to things. And it just like shook me because I was like, he knows what I'm talking about without even expressing it clearly or profoundly, whatever it may be, like we do when we code switch. And so I think that's why it's important, because we feel seen, we feel heard, and we know that we're not alone, and then we can then provide support to each other. So yeah.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for all the responses. I'm like literally to be able to breathe, like that's so real. Yeah, thank you. To belong, says Z. So I'm gonna kind of go through here why as well. Uh, I call it the 3 R's. It's a space to be real, to reconnect, and to reclaim. So I'll just quickly go through each. The realness is again, it's being shared in the chat box. When we are amongst other people of color, there's not the gaslighting. There's none of, and we have a feeling of where we can just drop everything and be ourselves, be authentically real. It's a space to reconnect. I love this part because you're not only having a space to that people aren't gaslighting you, you're literally getting to be in company with other people of color who share those similar experiences. So you have an opportunity to reconnect with other leaders of color. And then the last part I think is super important, the reclamation. It's, you know, I didn't share this at the outset, but I'm gonna share it now. You might probably want to write it down. But a recent study, I want to say it was in 2017 or 2020, I think it was 2020, said that 83% of C-suite level positions are held by white folks, meaning only 17% are held by people of color. So again, the higher you go up, the wider the space gets. And we tend to have to fit in and drop off pieces of us that actually make us who we are. So when we're in our own spaces, we get to start rebuilding and reclaiming all of those wonderful things that make us us. So we might have our white folks who might ask this question. And so this is, I'm putting this out to the people of color in the chat box. If you had a well-meaning, and I mean it, like a well-meaning friend of yours who's white says, well, if you have your own spaces, isn't that just segregation? How might you respond? So again, use the chat box or raise your hand, and Joanna will get your response verbally. But how might you respond if a white friend says, well, isn't this just segregation if you're separating folks? What might you say? Ooh, Sean says, segregation is enforced by those in power to keep people out of power. And then they say power a lot, but I mean, that's the truth. Paula says that's how I feel when she walks into most spaces. That's already been said to me. Ooh, this is for safety and support, not segregation. Lauren says, I unfortunately, oh, I was going to read your comment, Lauren, but I see you, so thank you. So you're hitting it on the nose. So I'm going to go to the next portion of the slide. You all hit it. So like Z said it, and Sean said it, these spaces aren't acts of oppression, but they're rather responses to it. Very critical that that distinction is made. And I'm going to continue on with my next question. How can another question a white friend might ask, and I do see your question there, Achille. How can inclusiveness be cultivated by excluding? So now let's say your friend heard your first part and said, hey, this is really about support. It's not segregation. Then they ask you this, well, then how can inclusiveness be cultivated if you're excluding white folks into the space? How might you respond to that? Sean says, I'd ask them to reframe the question. It's not about inclusion versus exclusion, but self-care. Like that. Do you mean how can we include you if we don't center you? Oh, that hits hard, Achille. Absolutely. Cassandra says, because the support we receive from our own space empowers us to be able to show you how we need to be treated. Keep them coming. I'm going to go ahead and, let's see. Next one. I think Achille just said it, and so this is how this person might respond. How inclusive are integrated spaces for people of color to begin with? And that's so very true because they haven't been. And so we need these spaces for those reasons. And Elizabeth says, well, being the authentic myself, girl folks girl, folks have been trying to put us down for years and it ain't going to work anymore. I am important. Love that. So I'm going to say it. So the Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams said, people who have always been entitled to space have no idea what it's like to have never been entitled to space. And I think that's critically important to understand for our white allies, that this is true. You know, it's the centering, as Achille put it, that we tend to do. And I do have a funny short story, but I might save it for later. But I had that moment where I was centering white folks and I didn't even know it, but I'll share it maybe at the end. So to continue on, the last, maybe another question are white folks. So again, these are my people of color. I'd love for you to drop in some answers. How are we, if your white friend says, well, how are we supposed to learn if people of color don't educate us? What might be your response to that? Read a book. Love it. 13th documentary. Yes. Pay me. I love that, Sean. Google it. Yeah. That's why Google exists. Listen to people of color, even when it's uncomfortable. You're responsible to educate yourself. These are great tips. Z says, it's not our jobs to educate you. Hold up. Ooh, that jumped fast. Where did it go? Oh, it's not our jobs to educate yourself. It's not as our job, our jobs to educate you. Educate yourself by listening, asking questions, take the initiative. TikTok, seek help, volunteer. White allies, are you asking us to put together a learning plan for you? That is so funny, Achille. I gotta meet you, Achille. I love all your responses because they're in like question form. I love that. All right, so I'm gonna go say what it says here. This is absolutely true. The presence of people of color may actually be harmful to white people doing racial work. And what that means really is that there might be a level of filtering themselves. You know, they may not, you know, well, let me put it in two ways. To expect a person of color to educate white folks, it can reopen wounds. It can re-traumatize them. I've had this happen to me more than a few times in my life, but I'm thinking recently where it's like reopening a wound. We have spaces like Google and books where folks can do this on their own. They're learning on their own. On the flip side, where it says the presence may be harmful to white folks as well, is, as I started to lead off with, is I think there's a level of filtering. So it doesn't allow for white folks to dig deeper, get into that really uncomfortable space if there's people of color around, because then there might be the social conditioning of white fragility, white defensiveness. All of those things can come up. So pull them out of the equation, pull people of color out of the equation so that you can get into those really deep corners of learning of things that are just really uncomfortable to get to where we need to go. And so anyway, so that's that part. So I want to ask allies then, why, so now I'm flipping it. So I want to ask the white folks on this call, why might you need your own space too? I kind of just fed you some of it, but what might be some other reasons why you would need your own space? Hannah says to learn and teach each other without expectation of labor from people of color. Elizabeth says only to do the work that people of color should not have to do. I like that. Becky says, I want to be able to talk about how to do better without making that the work of my BIPOC colleagues, avoid some judgment. Oh, these are really good. Jessica agrees with Becky. Deidre says, talk through it with with others coming from the same perspective. These are all really great. So I also call this the 3 R's, but I call it a little bit differently. They have 3 different letters. It's a space to reflect, a space to relearn, and a space to reemerge. Before I kind of go through that, I see Dawn wrote something, so I'm going to read it out. She fears ingrained cultural experiences, poor language choices might come out. She said she experiences this with gender issues because I feel old sometimes because I just so naturally use concepts and perspectives from growing up that need a lot of work to do. Thank you for sharing that, Dawn. It absolutely, there's an intersectionality to this for sure. So thank you for introducing those components of it, because there's ageism, there's sexism, and for sure the racism that we're talking about. So thank you for that. So yeah, so why wide alleys might need their own spaces too. It gives them a space to reflect. They don't often get that. And I think maybe here, Achille, is where I want to share my quick story. So where I almost centered whiteness was I have a program. I'm going to talk a little bit about it at the end. I have a program that I want to, it's this concept that we're talking about now. So I have people of color space. I have a white affinity group. I have topics for the people of color. So some of the topics are tokenism, intersectionality, microaggressions, bias of professionalism, code switching. I know I'm missing some effects of assimilation. I was going to give white folks, because I haven't started my first group yet, but I'm about to. I wanted to give white folks, maybe so there was going to be some overlap with some of the topics, but I was like, oh no, they're going to do white feminism, they're going to do white fragility, they're going to do white defensiveness. And then I suddenly got this epiphany, and it wasn't from me, it was somebody in a session last month. And she said, there needs to be a universal language. The topics need to be the same. And what I recognized what I was doing was I was centering whiteness. If I gave them separate resources, I needed for them, it became very clear to me that I needed for them to have the same topics to go through. And the harm is not there because they're resources and videos by people of color. So that was so huge for me. So this is a space. Now I'm so glad I did that, because when it launches, they're going to be going through these same things. They're going to be able to reflect. They're going to be able to relearn those harmful things. A lot of it is through social conditioning. And then they're going to reemerge better leaders. I think it's really important for me to also, I know I have some good time here. So again, I want to share one other component. The main thing for advocating for these separate learning spaces is because the healing is different. For people of color, we've never had our own spaces. In fact, people have been killed and moved historically in this country to not have their own spaces. And so there is a healing process to that of being oppressed. There's that healing of, I never have had my own spaces. I've been moved out of my spaces. That's why people of color need that space. For white folks, it's also a healing process, but it's different in the sense that, and I'm not saying it specifically for them, but certainly their ancestry, maybe there's, and I've heard this consistently with white folks, that there's a level of guilt and shame that they carry as they maneuver through wanting to be an ally, as they want to really be down for the cause. They still carry that guilt and shame. Having a space for them to kind of work through that, and the guilt and shame, and again, it doesn't have to be, it really comes from the lens of being the oppressor. I'm not saying that the white folks themselves are the oppressor, but maybe their families, maybe their parents, their grandparents, their ancestors, maybe they carried a weight that it's just it's a heavy burden for them now as their allies, and they probably still deal with racism in their families. And so that also is that guilt and shame of, hey, I'm moving down this path, and even my own family members don't understand. I'll be honest with y'all, my dad, who is a Mexican, carries some of that stuff. And it's really hard because I don't think he agrees. There's a whole unpacking there that, again, I can share with you offline why he's that way. A lot of it is a sense of wanting to belong in this country after being oppressed in his teens. But it's hard, because it's a journey. And if you're not willing, it becomes this belief system that is very hard to break out of. So having these separate spaces, healing spaces, I'll call them, are for those reasons. Anyway, so I'm going to continue to move forward. So I'm going to ask this question. So this is again to my people of color on the Zoom call. If your friend Well, actually, let me pause a little bit because we do have some time. I would love, and again, whether it's your comfort level. So let me back up a slide. Is there anybody on the call that would like to share? And I'm specifically talking to my white folks of what I just shared. Is there truth to it? Am I completely off base? Anybody who's willing to be a little bit vulnerable and share how that's shown up in your space, and you're willing to say it verbally, I would love anybody to kind of share that if they're willing to.
Frank, I see Carol has their hand up. So if you give me just a second, I will bring Carol on with you. All right, let me just find Carol in our wonderful group of presenters and attendees. There you are, Carol. All right, Carol, I'm moving you over now. You'll hear just a quick kind of silent click over. People always think that they're gone, but you'll come back in, Carol, and you'll be able to speak. So, Carol, you should be good. I don't know if we can hear Carol or not. Carol, can you hear us? Don't you love technology, Frank?
I know. Well, if we're having these challenges, then in the chat box, anybody who
Yeah.
is not of color, yeah, is what I'm saying, does it ring? Can you share some, as much as you want?
Carol.
Like I said, you don't have to
Can you
share a
hear me
lot.
now?
Oh, yes, we can, Carol.
Oh, good. I just had to press the button that said unmute. Took me a while. Anyway, I mean, I don't, of course, in my family, I grew up Greek, Greek American, and I cannot say that there was no prejudice against darker skinned people in my family, because there was. I remember
Colorism.
comments that my parents made, but I also remember that walking down the street hand in hand with my mother when I was very little, and a very pale woman calling me a dirty Greek and telling me to go back to, calling us dirty Greeks and we should go back to Greece. I do remember that and thinking that was weird. And I also have the experience when I went to Greece learning about how the whole world has the same prejudices, it seems. That because I was a little bit darker skinned, I was darker skinned. I was not looked as being, well, I was looked a little bit looked down upon by certain members of my family who were, whiter skinned and considered themselves upper class as well. So I don't, I'm not sure. I grew up in a town too where most of the in Pennsylvania, where most of the industrial town, where most of the students in my class were African American or Black, and I had friends. So I had a couple of, it was very confusing for me, growing up. Um, I can't say, there's definitely a small part of me that I can feel the prejudice, but there's also a part of me that overlooks that prejudice too. It's confusing being white, but being a white woman and growing up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, as I matured into you know, an individual an adult, I could relate to some of what was said, even if my skin was not darker.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, and this is my perspective, and I
Thank
don't know
you.
where I'm going with it.
No, well, I appreciate your perspective. And I mean, I have gotten some comments in the chat box. So thank you, Carol. I'm going to read Alicia's. She says, I was in high school before I realized my grandparents often made racist comments, and many of the sayings I picked up, she said she picked them up, that they became ingrained in her day-to-day language. And it stems from those racist ideas. So she says she's slowly been learning to recognize them and pick them out of her vocabulary. So thank you, Alicia, for sharing that. That's beautiful. Thank you. So thank you, Carol, as well. And so I'm going to, again, for the interest of time, I'll move forward. So this question goes to my people of color on the call again. So if you had a white friend, then after going through all of this, and then they say, well, gosh, how do I build authentic relationships with you or with other people of color? What might you say to them? And again, you can put this in the chat box. But yeah, what might you say to them if you had some white, like really well-intentioned friends? And well, how do I build authentic relationships with other people of color? What might you say?
And Sean's got their hand raised. So if you give me just
Please, Sean. Yes.
I will get Sean on. Okay. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Sean. You are ready to go.
Hi, do I need
Hey,
my
Sean.
Yes,
I can hear you.
okay. I guess I'll put my camera on too. I know I'm a little it's a little shady in the room, but the thing that comes to mind to me, and I swear it's so simple, but it's something I've noticed is really hard for most white Americans to do, is to treat us like we're human. I find that I don't know what it is, where like this simple acknowledgement of humanity is so hard for the vast majority of white people. But like the white people in my life, whom I call my friends, are they're not like for instance, they're not in this like space where they try to like act black or anything like that. It's just they're just regular white people, and we laugh about it too. And they have those just be like really open with each other, kind of just celebrate and be excited about the ways that we approach certain situations so differently. Like one of my best is like a couple of my best friends in the world are white, so it's like oh my God, I sound horrible. The I have white friends, but it's true. And it's not a question of like, oh, you have to agree with everything we say, or they never fight with us or anything. It's just that kind of gut level knowledge that my white friends see me as a person first and foremost. Is often it's a hurdle that I think the vast majority of white people I come across have a real problem with.
Thank you, Sean. Really appreciate that. And I'm seeing some really good comments in. Let's do lunch, be yourself, be genuine and honest. These are all great responses, and because really, that's really what that's what my next slide says here. It's going to say, come on, let's do it. There we go. Explore where you've held back and explore where you've perpetuated harm, then do your work to repair the harm. The last statement there, we're going to notice. People of color notice when you're being genuine and when you're being, that you really want to do the work. That's how you build those relationships, is just do the work. Correct me if I'm wrong, people of color on the call. I mean, do we notice that when we see folks doing the work, and then how our opinion of them may shift and change, meaning for the better when we see them doing the work? That's the response I would give, is like, just do the work. We're going to notice. That's how you build those authentic relationships. Thank you so much, Sean, for sharing what you said. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. And this is to everybody. So now this question is to everybody. What might happen? Okay, so I just told you this whole concept of why we need our own spaces for healing purposes, but there is an end game. It's not we stay separate. So what might happen if people of color and white allies learned in separate spaces, and then came back together to lead collectively, what might you think would happen? And let's start from for people of color. What might happen if people of color and white allies learn separately to lead collectively? How as people of color, how might that make you feel? So let's start there. And then I'll ask the same question to my white folks. Ooh, Alicia said something really important. I'm just going to say it really quick, and then we'll talk about it in the Q&A part. She says, I think part of the problem is that many people in general don't really know who their authentic self really is. Oh, we can unpack some of that for sure. So thank you. Seem like others actually care to do the work and be allies. So I'm just going to move through this because I think maybe it's too heavy of a question. So here's what I'm going to say. So I'll do these things, or I'll put these 3 statements up, and I think I really just want to get to the Q&A because I really want to get a sense of how y'all are feeling as we've gone through this. So I'll just read it. So when people of color, when we have our own spaces to simply just be ourselves, we can start that process of reclaiming every part of who we are. We can align our outward facing self that we show folks with our inner self, with our inner being. And that moves us closer to being our full authentic selves in the spaces that we have to navigate. So Alicia, that kind of answers it from a person of color perspective, but it's still, like I said, we'll still talk more about it. When white allies are doing their racial equity work together, their understanding then expands greatly, which then gives them a new perspective and how to lead in white spaces. And a lot of that really is seeding some of that leadership. What I mean by that is stepping back, letting people of color step into this space and letting them shine. And then I kind of close it with this: by learning separately to lead collectively, what ends up happening is we get to become the masters of our own stories, which then empowers us. And this is to answer Alicia's question or statement. I think it empowers us to lead with more authenticity and joy. Malcolm X says, by working separately, the sincere white folks and sincere Black folks actually will be working together. And in our mutual sincerity, we might actually be able to show a road to the salvation of America's very soul. I love that. Y'all want to know how my story ended? Probably should tell you. So here's how my story ended. I got my booth for free, and that's given me more ops to share what I do and what For the Hood does, which is my business. So I really want to know what your story is going to be, or let me flip that. What will your story be? So that's the end. I'm going to take it off screen. I see this QR code here, but if you really want to know about the spaces that I've created, I have people on the call. So when we get to the Q&A part, I see Sawada on here. I see Denise on here. I think I saw Eva is on here. So all of y'all, they're part of this program that I created. So when we get to the Q&A, would love for you to share some of your experiences with the other folks that are on this call. But I'm going to stop sharing the screen because I think at this point I want to have Joanna. She'll put the link to this as well as a link to feedback on the session itself. So I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah.
Those have both been added into the chat area. Thank you so much, Frank. And what we will do is I will actually, we can go ahead and get this kind of started early. And I would love, and I know that Achille has been adding some wonderful things. Achille, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but friend, I would love it if you would come on and just have a conversation, because I'm borrowing, just so you know.
I know.
There was one, she posted one that was so profound. I literally just grabbed it, where she said, it's like buying a house, you buy the foundation,
I saw that one.
all of the cracks. I was like, amen and amen. So I was like, I'm going to borrow that. So I would love to, if you all would raise your hand. I want this to be an open discussion. I want this to be a safe and, protected space that we can ask questions that we typically may not be able to ask in our day-to-day, in our, because a lot of times, Frank, this, and I just told Tom that I'll come off camera, on camera. It's oftentimes, I call it this: we send our representatives to work. Oh, there's Achille. And we oftentimes send our representatives to work, right? And when we send them, it's like, okay, I can't say this, can't do that, can't, I have to be careful about. And I just think that it's just nice sometimes to just be and be able to be your true authentic self. It does not minimize my education. It does not minimize what I know. And oftentimes that's what we're really worried about, right? Will they think I know less? Will they think I'm not as accomplished? Well, I teach at ASU sometimes, and that's my students' biggest feedback. You are so relatable. There is the lovely, and so I will attribute it all to you, friend. But I have to tell you, I was like, oh, that's another great one there. Very good to meet you. We have been actually emailing back and forth. Keely Worthy is with SRP and one of our presenting sponsors. So it is such a pleasure to meet you. I will go off so you can have a conversation with Frank. So thank you.
Well, all right. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here for sure. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Kelly. Loved your responses. They were all in question form. I was like, oh, I can actually see it happening.
Absolutely. I am a person with a very strong learning and development background. Curiosity is one of my core values. So I like to ask lots of questions before just simply coming to a conclusion. I've been in this space for a long time doing work around equity and diversity. My father owned and operated the first Black owned and operated radio station in Arizona. So we've been fighting the fight for a long time in the space of equity. So yeah, what kind of conversation are we getting ready to have? I'm ready.
I know, I'm ready too.
Well, I would love to know. So, since I have you both on, and we'll actually have Tandra join as a third, how are you finding? Are you finding resistance in being your genuine and authentic self? Like, people always say, folks are not quite ready for the conversation, and it can be a jarring conversation to have. So, how are you finding navigating the space? Because the one thing I found, I worked at APS for 11 years. And the one thing I found was that not everybody was ready for the conversation. And when you had the conversation, what it did was shut people down and it shut all of it down. So talk to our presenters, talk through with Frank and also Thomas, since you're in an education space. How do you navigate the space where you are genuine and authentic, you're heard and valued, right? But you're not, as I'll use the word, you don't appear aggressive or threatening. I'll use those two words because those are my words, so I would just love to talk to, because oftentimes I'm the one that put in there, I tend to be overly friendly because, I don't want you to, so even when something's wrong at a Starbucks or, I'm returning something, I'm overly friendly because I don't want you to get an air of aggression, which is typically once you see me, that happens. So I would love to just maybe have this dialogue about how do you navigate that? What are some resources, tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we've lost as a culture is the ability to be curious. I don't think that, you know, a lot of times people in these spaces have an intent to be malicious, right? I think that we all have a very strong set of beliefs that we hold on to. And if it's been our parents' beliefs and our grandparents' beliefs, and we find all kinds of things in society that support those beliefs and give us data to continue to believe it, when someone comes along and says, okay, well, this is a completely different perspective, it makes us recoil a little bit and say, okay, well, that challenges everything that I held to be true. So I think instead of being in a space where we are always willing to challenge, have that ability to challenge in your back pocket, but ask questions first. I find that people are a lot more open to share with you when they don't believe that you're coming from a space where you're getting ready to correct them or you're getting ready to come in with an agenda of making things right. So I would say that first and foremost.
Thank you, Akili. I would add to that. mind you, I'm like now plus 50. I hate admitting that, but I am. So I think age also helps. Like I don't care as I don't want to say it this way. It's not that I don't care as much, but it's been critically important, especially over the last couple of years as I've created this program and some of them are on the call. I would love to hear what they have to say. It's building that authenticity and not that you don't care. And I never promise in the program to say, oh, by the end of the program, you're going to be fully authentic in all the spaces, because that's a lie. But it's to be more authentic. And so what I find myself doing is, even I have a day job. It's a very white space. And I take more measured approaches than I would have in the past. And so they wanted to do, oh, we want to do this award show. What's the theme for our next event? And let's do a Chinese New Year type thing. I mean, mind you, it's like mainly white folks. And I could tell a few looked at me and they're like, Frank, are you going to say something? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to say something. So I did. So I said, look, I'm not saying not to do it. I said, if we do it, I said, we need to get some experts. Let's do it right. And then they ended up shifting out. So it was really just my way of like hoping that they exited out of that idea, which they did. So I think a lot of the authenticity is just when I come across those people, to come back to Joanna's question. Yeah, I really try to take a measured look if they're ready to hear what I'm prepared to say. I try not to filter myself, but we have to, because we don't know, there could be a power dynamic or whatnot. So what I'm finding for myself is the more I'm in my space, like here, for the Hood, that's my business. I'm going to be as open and honest as I can be. And sometimes that shakes people, but I feel like I'm always respectful. So even if I'm saying it, it's always respectful. And if they're not ready to hear it, they're not ready to hear it. But yeah, I got a code switch in the other space because I work in a predominantly white space. There is that level. So Joanna, it's situational. Like I really have to look at what situation I'm in, which is why I'm really moving into the space of doing what's for the Hood, because then in that space, much more adept at being who I am.
Yep.
And I'll just jump in and kind of piggyback on what the two of you said. First of all, Akili, you make a really good point about being curious, right? And then just, Frank, everything that you represent as a storyteller, I think there's a combination between the two. And I'll tell you, I'm a director in our Office of Educational Equity at University of Phoenix. So I'm going to speak from a space where I've had a unique advantage because being as much of my authentic self as I can has actually led me to the position that I'm in. I had a prior leader and mentor who really believed in me and supported my ideas and helped to elevate me. And sometimes you really just need that person that you can be your true authentic self with and speak to. And that kind of elevated me to the opportunity to co-create the department that I'm in right now. Now, 2020, that also introduced a unique opportunity, right? Because I'll be honest, in thinking of in terms of storytelling, there was a moment that I had during a meeting where I just could not hold it together any longer. We are meeting virtually. I'm very fortunate to be with an organization where we were already primarily online, so making that shift wasn't too bad. But I'm not going to work and go into meetings and pretend like the world is not on fire outside of my window. So as we were in a normal team meeting in my division, I got emotional. It was a time when we had curfews. I'm in the state of Arizona. My husband was telling me he's going to run into the office for a moment, not to worry, he'd be back before curfew. And I am in a meeting trying to pretend and code switch while I am frantic about whether or not he's going to make it home on time. And I became emotional, and I was my true authentic self. So authenticity for me typically comes with a little bit of a boundary, because I'm going to give you as much as I think you need to learn, to grow, and provide access. But I'm not going to give you access to me if I don't think that you are going to value the access that I'm providing to you. But in that moment, I didn't have time to think through any of that, because everyone was meeting in this box as if the world wasn't crumbling. And I'm wondering if my husband's going to come home safe, and his job is less than 2 miles away. So in that moment of vulnerability, the outreach that I received after that was outstanding. And my white colleagues had a realization of some things that they didn't understand before because they visibly saw it because they'd never seen me in that state. I've never shown that side of me. So I share that story to say that, as Achilles stated, be curious and lead with curiosity first, because then you'll know who you're speaking to and you'll know whether or not they have earned the right for you to be your true authentic self, or if you need to code switch just to get the work done.
Love it.
Yes, that is huge.
Achilles, like if we, and I feel like this is church, right? I'm with you, Frank. I want to start amening, but so the thing about it is, how do we then, as we're looking at this work, how do we, Frank, you mentioned it earlier, how do we prevent white fragility? Or how do we manage through? I won't say prevent because it happens, right? But when it happens, because I have to tell you, I've been working with a few clients, and the one thing that it's frustrating to me is we're doing this training that's for their executives, and these are all physicians. And we got to the section on privilege, right, Achilles? We got to the section on privilege. Everybody lost it. I mean, everybody, all the cool points that had ever been given in life were taken away when we got to the section on privilege. Doctors begin recanting stories of pulling themselves up by the bootstraps and things like that. And I was born and raised in West Africa, right? So what I said was, well, what happens when you don't have boots? And they looked at me like, and I said, well, I'm not trying to be funny. Like, my lived reality is I lived in a third world country. I dodged bullets going to school. So what happens when these boots that you speak of are not owned by everyone? So this idea of fragility, I find myself oftentimes, Frank, tempering the work. And Achille, I don't know if you find this also, tempering the work or the delivery, right? When depending on the audience. So how do we navigate through this notion of white fragility and even the notion of privilege?
Well, I can start, one, if it's a one-on-one, ain't nothing going to happen. They're going to believe what they're going to believe, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yes.
But the other piece of it, which is why I'm advocating. So when I started my business, I only focused on people of color, providing those spaces for people of color, and we'll continue to do that. But at some point, I recognized if I'm not providing space for white allies to be in space together, to talk about these things, then I'm doing a disservice for the person you just said, meaning like the one who's fragile, so they're sad to say, but they're gonna be more open to people who look like them and educate them on these things. So that's why it's so critical that we build our alliance of white allies, because of what you just described. It's difficult. It's very hard to change people's minds, but I feel like where you can start is when it's their families, when it's their friends that look like them. That's a good starting point. And again, it protects me. Like, I don't want to feel harm and be re-traumatized because somebody doesn't get something. I mean, I deal with it, as I mentioned earlier, with a couple of my family members that, quite honestly, I have to keep them at a distance. So that's my approach, is that you take the wins where you can, and you build alliances where you can, and you hope that person who's fragile has an opening. So that's why I like spaces like this, because then I can talk about it in mixed company, and those who maybe are on the fringes of it, if I've just opened their minds a little bit more, then that's a success.
Wonderful. Achille, any nuggets to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Frank has said. For me, when I consider the concept of people of color, I look at the fact that we are not a monolithic group. And as a Black woman, I feel like, we still need spaces to understand historically what has happened. I'm a student of history, and I'm a student of not only the history of America, but I'm a student of Black people. I like to consider the fact that, if Black history were a 1,000-page book, slavery would be page 999. So I find it to be important that there is education for Black people in particular about who you were before the Great Ma'afa, or before slavery actually existed. And if we talk about what happened in this country once that occurred, there cannot be a real conversation about bootstraps and meritocracy. Where white supremacy and superiority exists, there cannot be a meritocracy. Where there are programs put in place to ensure that there is redlining and policies and procedures to ensure the benefits of one particular group of people, whether you immigrated over here or not, as long as you were inculcated into the concept of being white, there were benefits provided to your family, whether you realize that or not. So we can have that conversation. I don't have to get angry about it because it's supported with fact and data. If you want to have a conversation around fact and data, that's one thing. If you want to have a conversation around fragility, I can entertain that for a period of time. But I am going to always lean on the fact that we are where we are for a very specific reason. If we want to look at the reasons, that's one thing. And we need to consider the fact that we need to focus on separating people from the policies. I think a lot of fragility comes into play because people feel attacked. It's not so much that we're attacking you as people. Let's look at the policies that have been put in place to ensure that there is a level of supremacy and superiority, right? If we deny those things, then we really don't want to fix anything.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so powerful. Thank you so much, Achille. Listen, Achille, don't be mad if I pull you into the next workshop. Like, it's gonna be the
She might be my co-presenter at some point in the future. I'm loving on Achille.
Okay, well, I appreciate the love for sure. Let me know what you need.
We are grateful. Thank you so much for your time. I want to bring another workshop presenter on, and she is someone that we have worked with for some time. So I want to bring her in because when we talk about allyship, Frank, this is very important, right? We talk about this idea. So I'm going to bring, and Maria is so sweet. She's like, really, you want to bring me on? But also, I want to hear from some of your folks that are in your program, because it's important that I did put that link in there. Maybe you can encourage a few folks, but I did put a link in there. And Maria, I am promoting you to panelist, so you should be on pretty soon, and I'll come on.
So I saw Denise, I saw Eva, I saw Sawada. Those are the three that I saw that have gone through the program. So yeah, if any one of you want to jump on.
Hi. How are you? So this is Maria, and I have to tell you, let me just kind of set the stage here. This work is a heavy lift, right? And not only is this work a heavy lift, but to continually grow and say, I don't know, I don't understand. Maria is the quintessential ally that we all need in our lives. And the reason is because she is always on a journey of learning. You know, there's never, you know how people are like, oh, I know that. I know what unconscious bias is. I know what, and they get really kind of comfortable in the, and we've always said, unless this is something you live, it is very difficult, right, to say So Maria, I just wanted to share, she's also our webmaster. So all the cool graphics, Frank, that you see that are developed with your awesome picture and all that stuff, that's Maria. So Maria, I just wanted to share, you've been connected to our organization now for several years, right? For some time. I would love to hear from you, your growth, your learning, those pain points, some of the uncomfortable moments, and just talk through what alignment to this work looks like. And I would love for you just to share. I think there you go.
Okay. So, wow, I'm really nervous about this because this is all so new to me. This is a case of you don't know what you don't know. And so I hear the stories on these calls. I'm like, wow, this is somebody's life. it's not just like a TV show, it's not a news article, it's not a podcast, but these are people's lives and these are people's like daily experiences. And so that's my biggest takeaway of getting involved and learning is that, wow, I've always had this like, this perfect little life where nobody's really, bothered me about anything. I only experienced that once. And that was when I moved to Utah. I'm like, wow, I am the minority here. But other than that, like I've never dealt with it. And so when I hear that other people, don't have that same experience that I do, it's really, really eye-opening. And I'm very compassionate about it because, I don't want people to live in this constant, pain and suffering of, what other people are putting them through. And it's not even anything you can do about it. There's no way that you can just be like, okay, I'm not going to be that person. Like that's just, where you're at. And I don't know. I'm just really fascinated by how all of this works.
Yeah.
But I want to do everything that I can because I want people to be safe and I want people to have the same opportunities and the there's enough for everybody. Like why can't we just I don't know, like I feel like I have so many variety of friends of all different types of backgrounds and everyone's as human as I am. We all have the same feelings. Like, why can't we have the same opportunities? Why can't we all have the same life? Like, I know that's a silly thing, but
I will share something with you, Maria, that's really powerful. So listen to what Maria said about not knowing, right? And Frank, the one thing I think sometimes we do is I get tired. I get tired a lot, right? But not sharing. Like I remember Maria and I having this conversation about hair. And do you remember this? And I said, some person just literally touched my hair.
Yeah.
And Maria went, why?
Mm.
What would possess a human being to reach over? And she was like stunned. And if I was saying this to, and those of you that are people of color on the call, no, if I was saying that, you'd be like, yeah. And that would be like, that's just our lived reality, right? Of people.
Yeah.
And Maria was stunned but here's the thing, you have to be able to share. That's the thing about even when you're tired, even when you feel like you don't have that renewed hope. I want you to constantly share because a lot of times, like in Maria's case, it comes from a place of genuine love. It comes from a place of genuine desire to learn more. It is not her lived reality, right? But it doesn't mean that she's not curious and doesn't want to know more and grow in that work. So Frank, for someone like Maria, what would you say? And then I've got Eva that I'm going to bring
Sure.
to Maria, please.
So Maria, a really quick question, and mind you, I'm just asking, are you a woman of color?
No, by my name you would think maybe, but I'm not.
Okay, well, I just wanted to kind of share. So what I love about, and again, Eva probably can attest to this, or Sawada or Denise. What I loved about, because we talked a little bit on the chat box around colorism. So like there's that spectrum as well. So and what I mean by that is even in the person of color space that I've created, we have a wide range of people who said, I've never experienced that, even though they're a person of color. And so what I love, what ends up happening, I think, in the space, and kind of to answer what Joanna's asking, it builds empathy. When you're in a space and you don't have the exact same experience, that's okay. But now you understand, oh my gosh, that person went through that and I had no clue. It just expands the ability to have empathy for others, even in a space with all people of color of all different shades as well, that we have a better understanding. And mind you, it's a mix. We have Black folks, we have brown folks. Those experiences aren't the same either. There might be some similarities, but what I would say to you is just keep that lens open. We went through this whole presentation, do the work. The friends of color are going to notice. And obviously, Joanna, sees it from you. So I mean, it's right there. So you just continue to do the work, continue to open and expand, and be curious. Just as Achilles said, be curious about our experiences. I saw Sean wrote in the chat box something along the lines of like, you know, if you want to know, ask us, but be ready to hear the hard stuff, you know, and that's critically important. So I would just encourage you to just continue to expand that. Even people of color, like I said, we're a mixed bag. Achilles said, we're not a monolith. We all have different values, experiences, thoughts, belief systems. Be curious, and I think that's what brings us together. But I would advocate, we have our separate healing spaces, then let's come together to lead in a much more collective manner.
You are awesome. Not only do you do the work, you like show up for workshops. I think that's so cool. So thank you, Maria. I love you. Mwah, 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 mwah. Talk soon. Cheers. All right, I'm going to bring our next person on, and I want to. So I'm going to. Eva is the next person I have on here. Eva, I'm going to promote you to be a panelist. You'll hear a little click over, and then you'll be ready if you wanted to go ahead and unmute yourself. Turn your camera on. We are ready for you. Hello.
Hi. You know, I've been in the Ascending Leaders in Color cohort that's currently happening now. And I just wanted to say, you know, it's been a good space to, you know, remind me about what we've been talking about, right? That not everybody's experience is the same. And to be, to have different experiences than my own a little more in the forefront of my mind. I recruit consultants of color to serve leadership of color that's serving communities of color. And I do make, you know, I do work with white people as well. And I've realized recently in, you know, expanding and recruiting more, that it's easier to recruit white people because there are more of them who are privileged and who are ready to jump in, and who are responsive. And it takes a little more time, a little more intention. You have to be really meaningful. Take that time to really, you know, build the rapport and the trust with people of color. And I think something that my best friend is going through right now, you know, she told me about it. She's working with, you know, just to give an example, it's really fresh in my memory. She's working with this recruiting firm that specializes in getting leadership of color, right? But they try to prep that organization that's looking for leadership of color to get them ready. But the truth is, like, it's hard to be ready, right? If your whole history has been white dominant, which most organizations have been. So also the main guy at this organization who she's been working with, who's been like prepping her for these interviews and stuff, is a white guy. And so he came out of one of the interviews and said, I thought you did well, but I was a little bit frustrated because you didn't really package your story the way, you know, you have this great story and you didn't really package it and you didn't really sell yourself. And she was annoyed by that. And she was like, you know, this white person will never understand how hard it is for me as a woman of color to sell myself. How hard it is, like, when my whole life I've been taught to minimize myself and be small and to, you know, be humble and modest, especially, you know, as a woman of color, right? And as a woman of color who was raised in the Midwest on top of that, right? So that is just like, it's just a little container for reminding myself and maybe sharing a story that can resonate with others in terms of like, hey, when I'm recruiting and somebody is being less responsive to me, or maybe a little bit distrustful, not sure if they should trust me yet, not sure if they want to jump in head first. There are many, many reasons for that. And I need to stay the course and really like stay the course and follow my North Star. And yeah, maybe it's easier, this, you know, this white consultant over here who's like really very like ready to jump in, very experienced, all that stuff. It would be easier to go with them. But I can't just go with them. I have to continue to follow my North Star and engage new people and cultivate those relationships, because that's what it takes in order to try to restore some justice and balance. And being in the Ascending Leadership of Color cohort has helped me to kind of keep that with me closer to the forefront too.
That is so powerful. Eva, thank you so much. That is what it's all about. I think there's nothing better than a testimony, right? It's like you can talk about your work, you can talk about what you do, but that's why I'm always like, it's more powerful for you to tell someone about my work than me to tell you about my work, right?
Totally, totally.
What they have experienced and how it has transformed the way they navigate and move things around, I think is powerful. So thank you. Continue to grow and learn. And so glad, Eva, you were able
Thank
to
you,
join
Eva.
us today. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks,
Well,
Eva.
I hate that we have to bring this to an end, but we do. We are out of time, and I want to make sure that we get some of our closing comments in with our sponsors. Frank, this has been a cathartic conversation. I love, I do this work. So to walk away, Tandra and I always talk about this, right? There are times where we are doing other things, and I was fully with you because the conversation was so good. And I think that's what we forget. That's actually our opening session at conference, is talking about personal narratives. The opening at conference is about storytelling. And I know people go, really? Yes, I'm telling you, because there is something profound about the connectivity we have around our stories, right? And I think that's really important. So I just wanted to, from Diversity Leadership Alliance, our board of directors, and all of the sponsors that continue to elevate our work, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the expertise. And with that, I will throw it back to our Education Committee Chair, Ms. Tandra Richardson, to bring us to a close. Tandra?
Thank you, Joanna. I'll agree, and let's just be fully transparent. Even though we are facilitating these workshops, and because I do sit on the board, I'm very passionate about my work with DLA, but often if it's conflicting with some of my work responsibilities, I have to multitask while I'm doing so. That is not something that can be done during this session. It was so good, Frank. So good, in fact, that I went back to LinkedIn and said, look, we're an hour into this thing. If you haven't joined, go ahead and join us and catch up via the recording, because you do not want to miss this. I love the way you facilitated it. I know that technology makes it a little difficult sometimes to bring people in, but hearing your voices and seeing your faces while you're speaking really adds a little bit of intimacy to our conversation and makes it real. So thank you for doing that. And Joanna, thank you for running all of the technology and managing. She's just the jack of all trades when I say that. Another special thank you to you, Frank, for today's workshop. We are humbled and grateful for your valuable time and contribution. We are going to make sure that we share this chat script out for you. I noticed in the chat a few people were looking for ways that they can connect with you. Yeah. We want to make sure that we extend that outreach so that you can impact some of these communities and organizations that really need you.
Thank you.
And yes. And just really quick, before I close out, Frank, any closing comments you want to share, or do you want to shout out any ways that our attendees can follow you or stay connected?
Sure. So yes, first of all, thank you both. Joanna, Tandra, I really appreciate both of you, and Maria for all the back end work as well. This is really exciting. And I just want to say one thing, however I can support your efforts in the spaces that you are, whether it's with the conference or whatnot, I don't want this to just be a one-off. I feel a lot of great synergy. So definitely want to make sure that you all know that. What I would send folks off with is I just appreciate their time, their willingness. Yeah, it's an interesting format. And I didn't realize the technology, meaning like you can only take one off and unmute them at one at a time, but we made it work. And the chat box was amazing. So I didn't necessarily need that interaction because this session really does require that back and forth, but we made it work. And so thank you to all the people who provided your comments. I was reading through them and I was getting chills at some points with some of what they said. I just hope that you have, if you are looking for a space where you can talk with people, move through this space of the work that we do, particularly with the topic with DEIA, Ascending Leaders in Color is a great space to do it. I keep it at 10 people. I didn't share this with anybody. It's a 9-month program, and we meet once a month, so it's a very low lift, but I keep it at 10 people per group to keep the conversation intimate. I have virtual options as well because I'm in Tucson, so I'm in Southern Arizona. So people in Phoenix are often always asking about, Frank, you're not here. How can we do this? So I have launched my first virtual one back in March, but I'm looking to launch more. So if this is something that you're really craving to learn more about the journey that we do and the work that we're trying to do around, inclusion and around equity, I would lead with equity. This is a good space to do it. And so this is essentially like a meta session of what it would look like in a 10-person group. So that's pretty cool. I think that's all I got to say. I know I'm rambling at this point, but much appreciation to everybody on the call.
That is great. I can only imagine what that looks like with that small group and just actively engaging throughout. And don't worry about the technology. I was messaging Joanna during it and just saying, I love the way that he's facilitating this, using the chat and bringing people on, even if there's a little hiccup, it really brings people into the conversation. So I'd love for people to share, what they thought about that and whether or not it's something we need to incorporate in the future, because we really like that. And it's great to see people's faces as well.
Yeah.
So just to close us out, I want to remind everyone that the work that DLA does in the community would not be possible without the important contributions from its volunteers, sponsors, and the board of director members. A very special thank you to Mr. Marion Kelly of Mayo Clinic. He is the co-founder of DLA, for his continued guidance and leadership of the organization over the past 20 plus years. And to my dedicated colleagues on the board for helping to move the needle on social justice. A warm thank you is also extended to Joanna Deshay, who, in addition to her leadership, is serving as our tech support behind the scenes. I think she did a fantastic job today. She was interacting with the webinar. She was taking you all off mute, bringing you on camera, and following along, and probably taking notes. So you did the thing today, Joanna. Thank you so much. We also want to recognize Maria, who we actually had the opportunity to see today. Maria Radloff of Via Maria, our webmaster, who makes us all look good online by managing the DLA brand. I have to say, it really touched my heart to see Maria, and you actually experience some emotion in what she was sharing. That's when you really see people's true heart and their authenticity. We'd not be able to do the work we do without the support of our amazing sponsors that help to underwrite programs such as the workshop that you attended today. A special thank you to Mayo Clinic, SRP, and the Channel 12 News for supporting DLA and its programming year-round. Now, if you've enjoyed today's session and content, please consider supporting DLA further by making a donation. Your donations help us to continue these vital dialogues and helps keep workshops and content like this complimentary to the community. In the chat area, you're going to find the link to click and make your donations online. DLA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and your donations ensure that we eliminate any barriers to accessing this vital information. Your donations may also be tax deductible, so please consult with your tax advisor. Now, don't drop yet. We want to thank you once again. Thank you all attendees for your time and attention today. Please come back next month and join us on September 12th as we examine implicit bias and structural racism with storyteller Hugh Velásquez. We are so grateful for you joining us for the August DLA workshop. I am going to say one quick plug. Go ahead and register for the conference. You thought this was good? This is virtual. Imagine what happens when we go virtual one day and then we join each other in person. Snag those tickets while they are discounted. And reach out to your employers and ask them to support your ERGs or other members to participate in our conference this year. Thank you all for joining us for our August DLA workshop. Have a great rest of your day, and please take care of yourselves and each other. Bye-bye.